Okay, so sorry about that. We're gonna go ahead and review some of this guy. So I think I saw he. This was a part of a larger video. I think of this guy's Signified B Sides. He Well, I think I let me do this right here. Um. So I thought I saw a more long form of him just criticizing black conservatives generally. This is only a 10-minute video. I was hoping it was longer, but if you know me, you know I'm a Thomas Sowell fanboy, mainly because I think that in a world where it's so easy to get bogged down by news stories, by biases, by salaciousness, by narratives, by emotion, Thomas Sowell was one who really kind of stuck to the data and kind of stuck to what made sense based on reality, common sense, and what did we see with our own two eyes. So he was kind of a sociologist in that sense, also an economist. I think more so classically trained in economics than sociology, but definitely wrote a lot about sociology. So we're going to go into this video cold turkey and see, and we're going to stop and just comment as we see fit, as I see fit.
Oh, Thomas Sowell is the blueprint for this shit. I cannot wait to get to a video where I can talk Thomas Sowell.
Talk about it now.
Oh my God, Thomas Sowell.
So,
oh my God.
I think
I'm
he
so
did
tired of
pronounce it
hearing.
Sowell.
I'm so tired. Thomas Sowell, all this concern.
Hold on. See, I knew this was a longer form video. I couldn't find his longer form video of it. Was it alive? Does he have a lot? No, it wasn't alive. I thought he had a longer thing for black conservatives because he's too animated. I do not like the energy he's giving Thomas Sowell right now. So like we're gonna jump back into it, but I do not appreciate this energy in the slightest.
Conservative black people shit. It's the same here. I'm so tired. Thomas Sowell, all this conservative black people shit. It's the same argument.
Let's hear it.
If it's like I'm gonna talk about it in the Black Manosphere video, but and if you watch watch my little Julesy video, the two Julesy videos I did. Watch my little Julesy video, the two Julesy videos I did on this B Sides channel. All these black now Gen Xers, boomers, and some of the millennials that are on this conservative shit are coming with the same argument. If black people just got their act together, there wouldn't be any more racism. We would have all the things we need. And that's not true.
That's not the argument, first of all. The argument, I know what Thomas Sowell's argument is. The argument is that if you put in the work, you will get the outcome. Because Thomas Sowell's main argument is that during slavery time, there was more white oppression, more systematic oppression, but black families were more cohesive and they were more productive, and black businesses were more productive coming out of Jim Crow. Yes, there were still endless atrocities, but the black community, the condition of the black community was still extremely admirable. People dressed clean, nice, clean. People got married to one another. So now we come to modern day where we have less direct interference by institutions, and we have less Tulsa, Oklahomans, where white people literally have to drop bombs on black neighborhoods that are economically productive. Now we have the black community being destroyed from within. 30% marriage rates as opposed to close to 80 back in those days. That's a huge difference. That means, and because families are fundamental, education is fundamental. So if you're not getting married, every single thing after that in life is going to just compound to be more and more negative for you and those around you. So what this gentleman just said is that black conservatives like to say if we just do what's right, that would end racism. No, it would counter the effects of the racist system. Black conservatives understand that racism exists. People like to think that black conservatives, which I consider myself one of, likes to think that racism don't exist. I understand that it exists, but I'm telling you, is that your actions, your free will, your personal autonomy and intellect can overpower it without a doubt, and on with extreme probability that if you decide to dedicate yourself with hard work, sincerity, and ingenuity, and use the mind God got you, and be kind and be charismatic and actually try, do you really think that you're not going to have good results? And look at the people, look at the black people that were successful in this country. Look at what they did to get there. Don't people so that's my first issue with his argument. That's no, what black conservatives are saying is that if you do good, you will get better results. Not that you're going to cure racism by doing good.
True. And that's been so clear. That's been clear. That's so well researched. That's so well documented.
Bruh, no one's making an argument. No one's saying that if you pull yourself out by the bootstraps, you're going to end racism. So what you're arguing the wrong point.
Historically, like, first and foremost, black people built communities in the image of Americana, in the image of capitalism. Black people built communities where they had shops and they had banks.
Yep.
And they had all the things. They had all the things they're supposed to have. Pick themselves up from their bootstraps. Historically, for over a century, and all across America. And what happened? White terrorism burned that shit down every time.
Every time? We need to understand modality. We need to understand modality because there are plenty economic. Some communities were destroyed by things other than white people burning them down. That's my only argument. Because his modality is off. He said every time, every means, without fail, that's what did it. There are plenty of communities that were destroyed by crack. And I'm sure there's a lot of evidence to show that the white subversive CIA structure kind of helped introduce and keep crack flowing through the communities. But again, that's not white people setting fire to your community. That's definitely some extreme subversive measures. But if your community is tight knit and marriage is marriage, like those kind of like drugs is not going to be entered into your community. The men on the street will keep the drugs from coming into the community. So the breakdown has to happen before something like that can spread like wildfire.
Every time. And it's not just Tulsa. Like if you go and you research black race riots, every time, like literally if not 100%, a huge percentage of black wealthy communities over 100-year period plus were burned and bombed by white terrorist mobs.
Has one happened? I wonder when the last documented white majority against black majority or minority race riot was held. Which one am I thinking about?
Number one to that whole bootstraps bullshit. Literally burned to the ground.
He's making an argument against hard work. How are you going to argue against hard work? That argument is literally saying take control of your life, which is true. If you believe the system is racist in and around an individual, would you tell him to rely on that system, or would you tell him to do for himself and do the best that he can?
So that's number one. So that happens consistently till about the 60s. Finally, like the reason why Atlanta has money, if you look at the history of Atlanta, people be like, yo, Atlanta got...
That happened to the 60s. We're living in 2025, 65 years ago. 65 years ago is
money, like go to Atlanta. Like people think of Atlanta, they think of black money, which is true. There's a lot of black money here, and it's black old money. The reason why Atlanta is so unique in America is because Atlanta was such a valuable, what's the word I'm looking for? Trade post for the entire country, because it had all these railroads that went through the entire nation that crossed in Atlanta, right? So the Union armies...
Not more than Chicago.
stayed in Atlanta for an extra like 30 years. And when the Union armies were there, guess what couldn't happen? White conservative mobs couldn't so easily blow up black commerce. They couldn't. And because of that, over time, black wealth was able to build up in Atlanta. Now, there's still all other issues, because like somebody said in the chat, we're not going to LLC ourselves to liberation. So if you come to Atlanta, you'll see a lot of black money, and it's still niggas in the hood. It's still, the police still shot a dude.
I hadn't heard that argument before, so I do have to take that on board. But Atlanta it does have the highest concentration of like black wealth, and all around the country, black wealth was just taken and absconded with by white mobs. But that doesn't mean, but a lot of people living today probably would have benefited from those systems and money, but that still doesn't mean that pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is not the best way to move forward and to make the best success of your life, given the circumstances you were born into. Because consider you have, let's not even name the country, let's just name the country country Z. In country Z, a child born has to basically start working from the age of 5 to get water, just has an extremely tough life just to maintain sustenance. So I say that to say that we all have to take advantage of the situation that we find ourselves in, and try to understand that we can only control what we do. We can't control the world around us. And no one is saying forget about the world around us, but when you start looking at history, every decision precedes another decision. And so to try to get back to what started what can be done, and we should try to learn from history. But again, the basic thing is, should you pull yourself up by the bootstraps, or should you wait for someone to come save you? I think even black liberals will say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, don't wait for no one to come save you. Well, then why waste time talking about it? Just get after it. That's my issue, because when you waste time talking about it, that may like ferment or plant like seeds of just defeatism and laziness in one's mind.
Dude, and didn't go to jail. And we got money in Atlanta. Fucking off track. How did I get here? Woo, got me heated with that. It's fucking Thomas Sowell. So let me just finish this, and then I'm gonna run after this. So number one is black folks have been picking themselves up by their bootstraps for generations, for literally centuries.
He didn't present one Thomas Sowell quote, by the way.
In this country, and for 150 plus years, they would just burn the shit down, like literally. That's number one. Then for those communities that weren't burned down, you go back to another video on the B Sides channel with Bellamy Rhea, where we talk about what the fuck is this dude's name? Robert Moses. Right?
Daily Senior.
And this is where we start getting into systemic racism.
Daily, yeah.
So
they plan cities
so
against
after
black
they burned
people.
shit down, they couldn't do that too much for a while, right? They couldn't just go and bomb and kill everybody. Starting in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you had people like Robert Moses and city planners that everywhere where black communities were starting to burgeon and have money and have success, they literally tore those communities down and built highways through them, destroying the foundation of black wealth in these cities systemically, unlike your boy Jordan Peterson, who I was going to talk about, but fuck Jordan Peterson. And that's well documented. And then you start talking about redlining and the prison industrial complex and all this other shit. And don't get me wrong, especially when black folks from the worst communities start talking about their struggle, and they want to talk about the pain within community, the black on black crime, the things that happen to black people, from black people in black communities. I don't poo-poo that at all. I don't poo-poo that. And I don't like, should we talk about systemic racism as the core factor? Definitely. But when people want to speak to their hurt, I hate when black bourgeoisie people who've never actually experienced poverty but read about it in a book want to tell folks that's really from the struggle to shut up. Don't do that.
So, but to me, it seems like.
But who've
I
never
think he
actually
misspoke
experienced
here.
poverty but read about it in a book. And I don't like, should we talk about systemic racism as the core factor? Definitely. But when people want to speak to their hurt.
I thought he was going to say definitely not. Because then he said, but when people want to speak. So, yeah, anyway.
I hate when black bourgeoisie people who've never actually experienced poverty but read about it in a book want to tell folks that's really from the struggle to shut up. Don't do that.
But 1 second he's talking about how black people never got a chance to make money, but now he's talking about a whole like black bourgeoisie. So that's black people with money. And there's more than black people that had money outside of Atlanta. And I think.
But the worst thing is the Candace Owenses and Thomas Sowells and all these other motherfuckers who will say shit like, when the black community in the 1950s, the black economy was doing so well. And then after we got welfare and we aligned with the government.
Is that not, oh, that's your argument? That's your argument? That's what you want to skip over, because if you look at the statistics, that's when the black, yes, there were incidents of racism. So he's using incidents to prove why the masses of black people fell off. And the statistics say that the masses of black people fell off because they stopped getting married to one another.
Like, no, you can look at the shit. That's not what happened. That's not what happened.
You don't know. You're not proving nothing. You're just talking.
Yeah, so fuck Thomas Sowell.
Wow.
Who Kevin Samuels loved, by the way. Kevin Samuels loved him some Thomas Sowell.
And I do too.
Because them going on Fox News and repeating that bullshit
it's not
generations,
bro,
is one of the big reasons why we have so many issues with mobilizing black political power in this country now.
It's not.
Because the first thing you have to do to mobilize black political power is to convince black people that we not going to pull our pants up out of this problem. All right.
So he's saying it's hard to galvanize black people behind a political issue because it's hard for us to tell other black people that we can't just work ourselves out of the problem. That's when he say pull our pants up, that he means we're not going to work ourselves out of the problem. We need some kind of leftist intervention. Is that what he's mentioning?
People that we not going to pull our pants up out of this problem. All right, so Prim just did a video. Prim is comedy. So, like, don't pull Prim in the left tube, y'all. Don't go over to Prim's channel, left tubing with that nigga. Let that dude do what he doing. This is good comedy.
At least he admits that he's left tube.
He did a video on this movie called Lean on Me. I don't remember when this came out. It had to be
Classic.
Like the late 80s.
Year I thought I was born. Classic.
And it was based on the true story of the dude with the bat named Joe Clark. Joe Clark was a principal in some rough city, and he went into this city and went to this school.
Yep.
And just did
Fire
some
and
real
brimstone.
Strong disciplinarian shit.
Put chains
Kicked
on the
all
door.
Bad kids out of school.
Kept the gangs out.
Just did a whole bunch of shit that if you're from that era, you think that's what we needed. You think we needed tough love. That's what made a Kevin Samuels resonate with so many people, because a lot of black folks.
Because it makes sense. Why did the Nation of Islam make sense back in the 60s, 70s? Because it was tough love. Stop drinking. Stop doing that. It wasn't babying people. Look at this left dude. He wants to baby black people for another like 50 years. And you think the community's going to get better by doing that? Lean on Me. Every black person who watched Lean on Me was like, all right, yeah, that's how you get stuff together.
Folks, we got so much trauma that we ain't
It's trauma. So instead of enforcing discipline, we got trauma now.
All kinds of names, telling you ain't shit, telling you can't be good at life because you don't have a father, and you think that's what you need to hear to get better, and that's not. And so
you're describing Color Purple, not Lean on Me. Lean on Me was a classic, bro.
Clark went in there with that energy. He had 1 or 2 successful years and then got fired, because you can't fix a systemic issue with extreme discipline.
He probably got fired because he didn't get support. So he's trying to prove his position that he had 2 successful years, then got fired. That would beg the question, why didn't he get a 3rd year? So he's just assuming it didn't work. Bayside High. I will answer. So this is why he said he got fired. I often said, quite candidly, that working in the inner city school, 2,000 plus students, is the most arduous task in the world. He said, you never go in there with a heart problem. That is reserved for when you exit. Clark underwent. The man who overwent open heart surgery, he makes it like he failed. The only one to volunteer for the job when it became vacant. So this is 87. Oh yeah, so it came out 89. Yeah. Who earned fame as a baseball wizard. So after the movie, he had already announced that he's going to take a sabbatical to write a book. As a normal human being, he's moving on to a process. He could have stayed at the high school if he wanted to. And he said, when he's asked, will he go back? He said, when going to any city with 2,000 plus kids, like, that's not good for your heart. And they said he had heart surgery. That poor dumb guy is nuts if he go back to teaching in that school. He burst on the scene, and he was rebuked by the Patterson School before his unauthorized expulsion of 66 students whom he called damn leeches, and for chaining closed doors to keep out drug dealers and undesirables. A principal who was the only one to volunteer for the job. I have to say this, there's no good, rotten a coward. I have to say that there's no good, rotten, coward bastards. He said, either go around constantly in fear of. So you're either going to walk around in fear of those vermin, which would render me ineffective. So you're either going to let the negative aspects of society ruin your school. So this guy right here would probably have rather Joe Clark found out how to keep the gangs out in a different way. Liberals always got solutions, always got alternatives to your solution, but don't never say them. What's the alternative? Joe Clark's solution was to put chains on the doors and to expel 66 students among 2,000. Get out. I have to dedicate 2 people just from walking you and making sure you don't beat up teachers and do all this. So just don't come to school so we can actually educate the other 1,950 students. But according to this guy, unless you can teach all 2,000 of them, you coming from a place of trauma, not efficiency. Or I will go about my merry way, lighthearted, trusting in the Almighty, believing in. What kind of grammar this brother had? Unpaid consultant. Unpaid consultant. That shows care. Can you imagine anybody in the White House being an unpaid consultant these days? Clark said he will seek a job with the federal drug czar William Bennett and plans to hit the college lecture circuit. Professionally, I intend to ponder a federal area with my dear friend Bennett. But specifically, I know I will go on this lecture circuit, promulgate and foster my philosophy that happens to be kin with that of society. Come on, Nat. What the heck is this? Clark was suspended by the school board for a week after allowing a performance at the school that featured male dancers stripping down to G strings. It was the 80s. You never know what niggas was doing in the 80s. But he probably also may not have knowledge of it. And also, leftists would probably love that claim. Clark, who was not at school. Of course, he was not at school. Set up by his enemies. So he was like, I ain't with that. They were just trying to set me up. I believe it. So we have this guy who basically say that it's just trauma. You know.
You just can't do it. Then no, that's not. And so Joe Clark went in there with that energy. He had 1 or 2 successful years and then got fired because you can't fix a systemic issue.
He must be thinking about the movie. Because remember the article we just read said test scores didn't actually go up. So this guy must be thinking about the movie, not the real facts.
You with extreme discipline. You just can't do it. So they made a movie out of him. And I remember watching the movie as like a...
You can't do it because of leftist bureaucracy. You can't do it. That's why you can't do it. You can't do it because people going to say, hey, why did you expel these 66 students? You need someone, if you have a situation that's out of control, you need someone in charge.
A 9-year-old, and it horrified me. It traumatized me to watch this movie because the first 5 minutes of this movie, the first 5 minutes of this movie is the most like low-key racist shit you'll ever see. Somebody said, you smoke crack, don't you? Like, yeah.
But kids like the movie. But when I went to elementary school in 1990s, it was gang fights every day. I went to school in the inner city. It was people smoking weed, smoking cigarettes, shooting dice. 2 of my classmates had children on the way when they was 13 or under by the time we graduated. So he's making it seem like this is not how it happens. But light skinned people do get picked on. If you don't have any connections, like if you do odd, you do stand out. If you're in an all white school and you're black, you're going to stand out. So I'm sorry you don't like the images you see, Mr. Signified B Sides, but like you're not really presenting any logical arguments about whether you think it actually happened or not. Maybe ask yourself, hey, do I think this actually happened? Not whether this is racist.
Made the kids look like super predators. Why does he have a bat? Because that was his nickname. He carried a bat around school in case he had to like hit motherfuckers.
In case he had to protect his students from a gang-riddled area where gang members would come in and out.
And of course, yes, the movie was written by a white guy. And so, like,
that means
this movie, they showed this movie to us as when I was a kid so much. Yeah, it started with welcome. Shit, I even missed that. The movie started with the song "Welcome to the Jungle," and it's basically
I guess he loved him a good microaggression. Let me hear it. But if he talking all this mess, he better not be in favor of Sexy Red. He better not be.
You know what the worst thing about aging is? It's not the fact that you can sleep wrong, meaning that you'll like lay down and fall asleep and wake up unable to move because a part of your body was just not in the proper shape or direction, and now you're just going to deal with pain for the rest. Those things suck, but those things pale in comparison to watching your peers and friends and people in your age group that you love and respect turn into out of touch, hypocritical, and clueless conservatives. Don't worry.
I might have to stop critiquing this guy's video because if his videos don't actually ever go into any facts or actual statements, if he just goes on how he feels or things he thinks he knows, like the best fact he said the last video was that in Atlanta, the Union troops were stationed there so less indiscriminate white violence could take place. But that was his only good point. Everything else, it just seemed like just stuff on the top of his head, stuff that he think, and just incorrectness. Just a lot of incorrect statements. Modality was off.
It'll happen to you. I am 41 years old, which makes me a geriatric millennial, one of the first of my kind. Millennials have a lot of distinctions. We came of age at the turn of the millennium. We saw 9/11 in our youth. Younger ones were watching the buildings fall while they were in grade school. We were children in a time before the digital revolution of media, meaning that we played outside but are still young enough to appreciate a good meme. But one thing that's not talked about for millennials is that we grew up with hip hop. Hip hop started in the late 70s, which means that youngest Gen Xers were kids when it was starting to gain traction, and older Gen have that. I was hearing hip hop as soon as I was born and reciting lyrics by grade school. By the time I was old enough to understand music culture to an extent, hip hop was becoming a dominant cultural force.
True.
And by the time I was old enough to appreciate that and indulge in hip hop, it was the 90s and the early 2000s, which is arguably hip hop's greatest era was the 90s, because that's when hip hop not for gay past
I'm
maybe
trying to
7 or
critique
8 years, like
his
full
Cardi,
purpose. But the
his
music
Sexy Red
itself
opinion.
is really good and has a variety that seemingly died for.
It's about streaming, algorithms, and money.
But even that is not a new thing. Like, copycatting names is as old as hip hop. Tell that to Ice-T and Ice Cube and Vanilla Ice. Or how about Big Daddy Kane, Big L, Big Pun, Notorious Big? In that environment. I didn't grow up under that environment. I grew up on all the worst types of hip hop that parents hated. NWA,
Okay,
Snoop Dogg,
so what?
Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Does that
2
make
Live
it right?
Crew, Wu-Tang Clan, Cash
Does that make it right? I can't wait till I hear an actual point.
Money, etc. And guess what? I've never had any issues with falling too far into the mythology of that music. I managed to stay out of trouble with the law, out of trouble in school. I got two.
Okay, but that's probably due to many other factors than you just listening to music. But because you imagine if you have a good home, imagine just having two parents. Imagine having a home with two parents and you listen to hip hop or listen to ratchet or hip hop. You're probably going to be less influenced because you have other influences. So don't, just because it didn't affect you doesn't mean it can't affect someone else, buddy.
2.5, 3.5 degrees? Damn.
So
why?
what?
Because much like the overwhelming majority of consumers of gangster rap and hardcore hip hop, I'm not actually in that environment. I didn't grow up under that environment. The things that are being rapped about that were negative or wrong or bad for me did not have any tangible connection to me. Meanwhile, I have cousins who grew up on the south side of Chicago that listen to the exact same music, were just as smart as me, don't have the same outcome because their opportunity structure was very different. And are we going to talk about the fact that the vast majority of hip hop consumers are white people?
So listen, I take his point. Two people from the same family on the south side. So he's saying that they're just in a bad conditions, so they listen to that music and their conditions dictate their outcome, just like his conditions dictate his outcome. But what he doesn't fail to realize is that the hip hop and that lifestyle may be overwhelmingly more appealing to someone in the street, and they find they may cling on to that too much. Just like someone, you ever seen someone who just loves celebrity gossip? Like, you're clinging on to that too much. Like, you're not, it's almost as if you're afraid to live your own life, or you think your own life is so underwhelming that you need to comprise it of other people's lives. So, and I think when people in poverty, they are subjected to that as well with things like hip hop. Like, knowing what's going on in hip hop, like who took who chain, being invested, like still like, and how does this guy get around drill music? How does he get around, now they're making actual songs naming the people that they're killing in real life? Like, music's not affecting them. They're making music to, they're killing people to make music now in some drill music. So and he's talking about, oh, they sell it, the hip hop is sold to mostly white people. You don't see them going out there living that kind of life. Yes, you do now. You do see more white people getting into rap. It's permeating all different kinds of culture. People want to be cool. And like what is hip hop? Hip hop is not caring what people, they're not caring about the rules of society, which isn't necessarily good overall. Like, it's hip hop is how does a white lady dance? Hip hop is bam, bam, white legs. No, and of course I know that hip hop isn't monolithic, but we all know that, like, swiping credit cards through booty cheeks, big pimping, it's there, and because you get one or two conscious lines, it's about it's about what's right and what's wrong. If you compare a hip hop as a culture to what's right and what's wrong, where does it come out? Is the only question that ultimately should matter.
And the white folks in trouble with the law ain't listening to NBA YoungBoy. They're listening to Tim McGraw or Toby Keith or
what is he talking about? He's just talking.
Here.
He's talking out of his rectum. He's just choosing to say that the people involved in white people involved in the law listen to that. I guarantee you, there are white folks who listen to ratchet, crazy shit. There's not a lot of them, but bro, just like I just hate incomplete. Like listen to this statement. As a logical human being, listen to this statement.
Because or Toby Keith folks in trouble with the law. YoungBoy, they're listening to Tim McGraw or Toby Keith or ain't listening to NBA YoungBoy. They're listening to Tim McGraw. And the white folks in trouble with the law ain't listening to NBA YoungBoy. They're listening to Tim McGraw or Toby Keith or insert whatever small.
White people aren't a monolith. This is my problem with leftist thinkers. They're so incomplete and lazy. You know one thing Thomas Sowell wasn't? Lazy with his words. He was careful with the words he said. He knew what modality was. And sure, he might have generalized here and there, but this guy just said that the white folks that listen to the trap music and hip hop ain't the ones committing crimes. Without a shred of evidence. He just put up country music singers and just said some statements.
Town country singer here because their opportunity structure is fucked up. It's not the music, it's the society. The music is a reflection of the problems in society. By itself, rap music is not responsible for damaging black anything. And that is
of course not by itself. Is it a negative influence? Liberals love arguing against the easiest argument in the world. So instead,
by itself, rap music is not responsible for damage.
But of course, no one in their right mind would say by itself, rap music is
black anything. Society. By itself, rap music is not responsible for damaging black anything.
By itself, rap music is responsible for damaging anything, which still might be too extreme of a statement. But is that what we're talking about? Is it detrimental? Is it a good or bad thing to have pumping through your community? That's the question, bro.
And that is a stupid cop-out for people who want to grandstand and feel holier than thou, or maybe just have a viral TikTok or
acknowledge reality
or tweet that they know everybody's going to react to because they don't give a fuck about negative attention as long as they get attention. So here's me giving my pound of flesh for that problem as well. Going back to that Ed Lover moment earlier on the Math Hoffa podcast, I cringed at it a bit, but I think Ed really dropped wisdom and came from the overall right place. Because at the end, he pointed out that it's the elder generation's responsibility to craft the world they think that the kids need. And any failures of the youth is a reflection of our shortcomings as much as it is theirs.
True, but acknowledge the shortcomings. Say the way we crafted the hip hop game is bad, but you're saying the hip hop isn't also the problem.
Incidents over what music really is, what talent really is, that they should never stop making music. And I think that even if you reach out, even if they don't want to hear you, just reach out. You know, I love when I see young niggas grab older niggas and make music with them. But these younger niggas.
Yeah, man. Like he's just not an impressive thinker to me. Not at all.
So, Cat Williams set the internet ablaze early in January after a fire experience on the Shannon Shop podcast, where he basically drugged most of the biggest black comedians around for the last 20 years. Kevin Hart got hit, Steve Harvey got hit, Cedric the Entertainer got hit, and many more. He also said he ran a 4.3 40-yard dash, which is really, really fast for those who don't understand that language. He said he was accepted into college at the age of 7 and that he reads 3,000 books a year since he was 12. So, as fun as it was to hear him make fun of some other black celebrities, I don't put a ton of stock into what he says, though there have been plenty of videos coming out that proves that he wasn't lying about certain things about certain comedians. And he did post a video that shows that he does indeed look pretty damn fast for a 50-year-old man.
Yeah, put that on the comments.
But one thing that came out from this Cat Williams conversation is the ongoing he put on a dress discourse, or the he had to put on a dress discourse, which is one of the dumbest myths.
God damn it! I'm hoping he's gonna substantiate his arguments, or at least acknowledge the other side properly, without just switching up, moving the goalposts.
And like, you know, rumors that have been around black entertainment discourse for decades now, but it's hard to fully describe or make sense of this one because it is really old, and it does have some bits of truth attached to it tangentially. Like this one connects back to the, you know, Illuminati discourse that I talked about with Beyonce. That's been around over a decade, but also has some old-fashioned, you know, homophobia, misogyny. So it's hard to perfectly pin it down, despite the fact that comedians, black and otherwise, have dressed in drag for probably a century now. At some point in the 2000s, this myth developed out of the mustiest, most unsterilized.
It was definitely before the 2000s. So he thought that came about in the 2000s.
Flippers having barbershops in America, that there was a concerted effort to emasculate black men by putting black male celebrities in a dress, or that if you wanted to be successful in Hollywood,
or just men, period. Like, why do men have to look like women on TV unless it's just for some weird, quick laugh? But I don't know.
As a black man, at some point in time, you had to wear a dress or something along those lines. And on several occasions, Cat Williams alludes to this idea that other celebrities, including Kevin Hart, are plants, and that they must have had to do nefarious, possibly even demeaning things in order to get famous. And while I would agree that soul plane is a hate crime, and Kevin Hart should continue to be ashamed that he was a part of that movie,
Coleman Hughes, I think, is more.
Doesn't make sense and has never made sense, and I hate it, and I want to talk about it. Now, there is a clear truth in the idea that to get very rich as a black person in America, you have to find a way to access the wealth and
he's just too unsophisticated. Like he's such an like I'm sure Ibrahim X Kendi is on his bookshelf. Like his points are like not substantial enough to even address, in my opinion. But you see how this guy, like, he's talking about all of these things, but they don't like to talk about Gaza or Israel. The last time he talked about it was a year ago. We'll just do some of his shorts.
And then, I mean, we know from the examples of really the most famous and outspoken apostates from Islam that even if a good majority of Muslims worldwide don't think anything bad should happen to Salman Rushdie or Ayaan Hirsi Ali, enough do, and they're powerful enough that they will hunt you down for 20 years. And if you're like Salman Rushdie, they may eventually get you. And then, I mean, we know from the examples of...
Okay, so he just said, let's just do a quick fact check. Salman Rushdie, he said apostates. Was he ever a Muslim? Oh, he was born to a Muslim family. Okay, I'm just making sure people are keeping on the up and up. But enough power. He doesn't say who those powerful people are. And also what he doesn't mention is that people are going to get upset at Salman Rushdie, at Ayaan Hirsi Ali, when they lie on someone's religion and just tries to bring shame on an entire group of people by lying. It'd be different if you just was presenting your view, but if you don't present the other side properly, or if you just lie, like Ayan Hirsi Ali has, I think, lied a lot in some of her appearances. So I do think no one should be physically assaulted unless they physically assault someone else. However, I think the issue is more than just leaving Islam. If you leave Islam and start slandering and making lies about Islam, you're going to continue to bring negative attention to yourself. Just as if you slandered any particular person of culture over and over and over, it's just like you can't get sued because you talk stuff about Islam. It's an idea, a way of life. But let's just say Salman Rushdie or Ayan Hirsi Ali was talking about if the Prophet Muhammad was alive today and he could sue them, or like they're talking about an actual person. Does Hamas want to? This guy.
I don't think it is about the settlements in the West Bank, although that certainly does not help the situation vis-a-vis Palestinian outrage. But fundamentally, I think it's about, for Hamas, it's about the fact that there is a Jewish state of any size on Muslim, what should be Muslim land. And fundamentally, until the Jews of Israel pack up and leave, Hamas will not be happy. And they will fight, and they don't observe the difference between combatants and non-combatants, because
that says who? What are you basing that on?
I think they're true believers, right? They're not
Israel is literally murdered 50,000 children. Like, he's a coward, man. These people are cowards. Cowards, bro. Cowards. Absolute cowards, bro. Because on the issue of Palestine, and when it comes to Israel, just literally he doesn't want to go over the Human Rights Watch report. They're going to brush past a lot of that stuff, man, and it's so frustrating.
There was a really interesting conversation between Joe Rogan and Coleman Hughes on their podcast around Israel. Coleman previously has been, I think it's fair to say, a defender of Israeli military actions, but in general, he's a serious guy, and he's willing to kind of hear things out and to debate. So him and Rogan kind of went at it around Israeli military conduct. Some revealing things here in the discussion. Let's take a listen. We'll react on the other side.
There was one point where you were kind of saying it's almost as if the Jews are doing what was done to them.
Well,
as if it's genocide.
I'm saying that when you're killing 30,000 innocent civilians in response to something that killed 1,200 innocent civilians, and you're continuing to bomb an area into oblivion, which is what it looks like when you're looking at Gaza.
Let's just, we all hear what Joe is saying. Let's hear how Coleman responds.
There's many people that have made the argument that is at least the steps of genocide, or a form of genocide. You're destroying thousands and thousands of people's homes and killing them.
So when you say 30,000 civilians, it's not 30,000 civilians that have been killed, though.
How many thousands have been killed?
So according to Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas, the number they have is 32,000, but they don't distinguish between Hamas and civilians.
How many members of Hamas are there?
40,000, something like that. I don't think the number is known, but it's tens of thousands. So Hamas says 32,000 people have been killed, civilians and soldiers.
So he's saying that, not that many civilians are being killed. That's his argument.
Israel says 13,000 soldiers have been killed by Israel. So if you let's not doubt either number. They could both may or may not be. That would be 13,000 soldiers killed, 19,000 civilians killed.
Okay.
Which for urban combat in the Middle East is a very normal ratio.
Look at his face shiver.
A very normal ratio.
You see the way his lip shakes after he says that you should be able to kill 17,000 civilians if
for
13.
Urban
look at his lip
combat
shake.
in the Middle East is a very normal ratio.
I see what you're saying. If you wanted to look at it cold and objectively.
Right, but the human
I hope it doesn't come across cold, because
it does.
It's mostly women and children that are dying, that are dying because they're in a place where these terrorists are, right? I mean, it's not
because the terrorists on purpose embed themselves with the civilian population, which is a war crime.
Right, which is a strategy that they have clearly employed when you see them, and when the IDF went into that hospital and found Hamas
recently.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's real. It's not just a conspiracy theory. We know that that's real. But it's
Debatable.
you're still talking about 20,000, whatever it is, of innocent people getting bombed.
Yeah,
into the
why,
Stone Age.
Coleman?
Well,
Why?
the
That one I don't know.
accusation was that they were shooting people that were trying to
Yes.
get aid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you don't think that's the case?
I think it's very unlikely.
Is it possible?
Yeah, it's possible. Absolutely.
There
My
is.
assumption is that there is going to be war crimes in this war.
Right.
Because, and I know Kurt would probably say I'm doing the tragedy of war thing, but it's actually a legitimate point in every single war, even the just ones. There are war crimes by berserk soldiers, by the good guys.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's genocide.
There's a lot here. So first of all, with regard to the targeting of women and children, we actually just learned quite a bit, and I am going to lay all this out in my monologue, but there is an active Israeli government official policy which says, hey, first of all, we're not just going to target the high-level Hamas commanders. We're going to...
Not to cut her off, and because it's very clear what's happening. So when people like Coleman Hughes wants to sit back in his chair and just like, oh, war is ugly kind of thing, you're a coward, bro. You're a coward, Coleman Hughes. The fact that you can't realize that, just look at the data. Listen to the experts. John Mearsheimer dedicated his life to understanding warfare and and political science. He didn't call it genocide right off the bat. He waited, but you know what he calls it now? Genocide. Then you got this half a drop of seminal fluid up here talking about war is ugly and the Hamas numbers and bro, Gaza went from being an habitable lush land to the Israeli government said they're going to cut off the water day one to 2 million people. That in and of itself is a war crime and is the basis of part of the claim for genocide. But, just lean back in your chair. Fuck, coward individual, Coleman Hughes. Absolute coward, man. So all these people, because look, if I go on this page, I'm probably going to like a lot of the stuff that Coleman Hughes has to say on his page. Let me see if I can find something with him I agree on.
It's a tragedy for the Palestinian people there, just as there's a tragedy for the Israelis. But to not see the particular role that Hamas have played in orchestrating.
Why did Bibi Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, fund Hamas? Why did he send Hamas the money? If Hamas is so bad, why did he send them the money?
That tragedy is a kind of willful blindness, because the facts are obvious to me and to anyone looking at it dispassionately and trying to make sense of it, I think. But Israel-Palestine occupies a particular place in the parts of the left and the parts of the Muslim world where it's a kind of it's become like the one thing that people feel they should have some moral certainty over, and they want a kind of good versus evil story. But as soon as you start looking at the facts, I think it's just very hard to sustain that.
Okay.
It's a tragedy for the Palestinian people there, just as there's a tragedy for the Israelis.
So it doesn't sound like she's saying Hamas is the problem. He's saying Hamas is the problem in his caption, but she's saying, if you look at it dispassionately, it's hard to find out who's good and who's evil. That's what she's saying. But Coleman Hughes, anyway, let me see if I can find something this knucklehead says that I agree with.
My message is really for any key decision maker at any institution anywhere in the world. If you care about fighting racism, embrace colorblindness. Support class-based policies. Create colorblind processes in your own world. If you're a professor, grade your students' papers blind to their names. Think creatively about how to apply colorblindness to your life.
I think that's smart overall, definitely would offend DEI people as much as the Hamas clips offend me.
Why don't you just tell the truth and just say you don't want to be uncomfortable finding out the real history about how this country started?
You don't want to feel bad.
You don't want to feel bad. And I get it. No one wants to feel bad. But you know when I feel the worst? When I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Wouldn't it be better for our electorate if it was informed before we actually went to the polls instead of just being guided by emotions that aren't based upon anything other than anecdotal fears?
People are responding to a real issue, though, right? I don't think the law is the right way to deal with this, but there's a trend of people going into their workplaces and being told by people like best-selling author Robin DiAngelo that, white people shouldn't cry around black people because we're so fragile, or all of these insane hyper-progressive notions about race that make race...
I don't know what he's talking about there, but I would also be interested in watching this video.
Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Coleman. If you live in Australia, I'm doing 2 live events with Josh Zepps at the end of August. The first one is in Sydney on August 25th, and the second is in Melbourne on August 28th. So if you live in Australia or you happen to be visiting, please grab a ticket at the links in the description. They're selling fast. Once again, that's August 25th in Sydney and August 28th in Melbourne. Okay, my guest today is Glenn Loury. Glenn Loury, as most of you will know, is one of my intellectual heroes, and along with John McWhorter, one of the people indirectly responsible for my existence as a public intellectual.
Night and day transformation for me intellectually and personally.
Why it is the case that the black family broadly was quote unquote intact, meaning most black kids before 1950, 1940 were growing up in 2-parent households, which was very surprising to me when I first read it. I actually didn't believe it. Wow. Because it's such a ubiquitous phenomenon my whole life that 60, 70% of black kids are, grow up in out of wedlock homes. It was difficult for me to imagine a reality in which that number was closer to 10 or 20%. As it is, you're born into the world, you assume things have always been the way that is right after the Civil War, not so far off from the number among white Americans, right? And street would and can see to actually the kinds of
so different, yeah. So, like I said, I came along in the 50s and 60s. It was a big deal in 1965 when Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Yeah, man. I get so aggravated when people like this just bootleg. Like, it's very clear. Like, part of me wants to just go to it. If you read the Human Rights Report, Genocide Report, Amnesty International's Genocide Report, the International Court of Justice court order finding it probable that Israel was committing genocide. People have decided to put their heads in the ground. They don't want to talk about the facts. They don't want to interview. They don't want to interview anymore. I doubt that he actually eviscerated someone. It's
Palestine has existed for over 3,000 years ago. I believe it will still exist until the Day of Judgment.
Palestine is a name that does not...
This might be worth watching.
Rudy Rockman and Wajahad Ali, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
No, thank you. And I'm
Rudy, Wajahad brought up 4 points. The first point is that just trying to characterize what's going on in Gaza. He's saying, there's more children and journalists killed in Gaza than in anywhere else in 2 years. And that leads to a second point about saying that it's genocide, and he gave some pieces of data there. The third point is that Netanyahu and the government has forgotten the hostages. Maybe they don't care. They're focused on expansion. And the fourth point Wajid mentioned at the beginning was that it's not just in Gaza this is happening, it's also the West Bank. So can we focus on that first point? What do you make of Wajid's assertion that there's more children and journalists being killed in Gaza than anywhere else? I think that's an important point I want to ask you about.
First of all, we should open up that I think we're both in agreement that any civilian killed is one civilian too much. I view Palestinians as my cousins. I think Israel has the responsibility to create a better reality for all those in this land, given that it currently has the power, has the responsibility to create to do so. And in many ways, it has failed pre-October 7th, during October 7th, and post-October 7th. But, it was interesting that you said that you didn't see it as a genocide. And then the moment they blocked humanitarian aid, without giving the context as to why they blocked humanitarian aid, that they only blocked it at certain times when Hamas was stealing that aid and then selling it to their people for very high prices. And they did so that Hamas wouldn't get access to those supplies, but after that gave back all the supplies necessary to the genocide. A genocide is an intentional elimination of a large population because we have individuals like Smotrich, or definitely it's a term, all the things go inside which apartheid, genocide, ethnic apartheids and genocides and ethnic cleansing and colonization and settlements. And today's are so guilty
because the International Court of Justice, who actually have the definitions of the laws and who Israel came and defended themselves, they heard all this and early on and said that the case can move forward because the probability, the standard was already met to keep talking about this.
Crimes at their ancestors, that rather than looking in the mirror and dealing with what they've dealt with, they're pushing off their white guilt onto the Jewish people and blaming the Jews for what they've done in this world. Now, has there been everything perfect that Israel has done? I can tell you no. Obviously, I've seen that in every attempt Israel could have, it tried to minimize casualties. When I went into Khan Yunis, I was the first unit in. There was not a soldier there before. There were leaflets on the floor that had warned days before for people that were living in Khan Yunis to evacuate the location. If Israel wanted to maximize the amount of civilian deaths, then it wouldn't have warned the civilians to leave. And it did so.
No one says they're trying to maximize. They say you're trying to wipe them off the map. So you're moving the gold standards. No one says you're trying to maximize death. We're saying that you're killing indiscriminately. Sorry, the words mean things. Because maybe you don't want to maximize, but that still doesn't mean you're trying not to commit a genocide.
In every single way, there are many times where we couldn't go and operate in a specific area because there were civilians. But when you're at war, it's very complicated. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't. There are a lot of 13 years old there, at least civilian casualties. But like I said earlier, I would blame Tories' attempt to create something together. And the textbook thing from change this. I think it has always been working. Is you align yourself with a strong country in a region. You maintain that there's a conflict going on. You pump weapons to both sides. And in order to keep Israel down, because it does compete with America, to make sure it's always down, you make sure that there's a constant conflict there. They keep having credit. The weapon companies keep profiting. And in the meantime, the Palestinians and Israelis keep dying. So it's not in the benefit of Israel to keep this war on. It's not in the benefit of Palestinians to keep this war on. It's in the benefit of certain countries and corporations that are profiting from this. And if we were more specific and united as a people from this region, both Israelis and
I'm not necessarily against that. But Israel, when people were peacefully protesting, Israel was shooting protesters at the gate. So they need to do a better job of allowing peaceful protests.
Palestinians and other Middle Easterners to change that structure and to call out those systems and to change the way that we have those relations with foreign countries, then we would see a valid change. And I'd like to touch on a last thing, and I think this is something that we might disagree on. The West Bank, which is also called Judea and Samaria for thousands of years. I mean, if you dig in the land, you find Jewish history. You don't find the British history that's named the land West Bank because it's west to the
UN resolution says it's Palestinian
this
territory.
This is the ancient homeland to the Jewish people. Hebron.
UN resolutions in the modern world where people have to live and avoid war says that's Palestinian territory. So is he about to make an argument saying that, well, under international law, something is very clearly Palestinian territory? Is he trying to say that that's Jewish land?
Bethlehem. I mean, even Shechem, which was renamed to Nablus, which is a mispronunciation of the colonial name. Neapolis, what the Romans named it. And because in Arabic, you don't have the letter P, you say B, it became Neapolis, which is fine. Palestinians have the right to live there. And most Palestinians actually descend from Jews who were converted to Christianity and Islam. So they're absolutely native to this land. And I view them as my cousins and people rightful owner, but Jews have a right to live there. So a Jew living in Judea and Samaria, building a village, is not making a settler. In every situation, the word settler means someone who builds a settlement, someone who's a foreigner.
If you go into, we have modern land, so basically he's making a very like kind of like kumbaya argument towards colonial settlerism.
Foreigner. Jews are not foreigners to Judea. So although if a illegal village is
They
built,
may not be a citizen of a country. Mexicans aren't foreigners to Texas, but if they come to Texas and try to set up some land with somebody owned, they will be thrown in jail or killed.
should be condemned. And every time an illegal village was built, it was destroyed in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. We should be against illegal building on any side. If a Palestinian were to come in to build into my own apartments, that would be wrong. If a Jew were to go and build in a Palestinian territory, that would also be wrong. Let's say they have a farm and they're building on that farm, that should be wrong no matter
why
what.
are you talking about the West Bank?
And we should live by law.
Just say
but
that first.
A Jew deciding to live in Judea and Samaria, wanting to live side by side with other Palestinians who've always lived there, living there legally, respectfully, not taking away
Legally
anything,
is the
buying
big
everything
question.
legally.
They're not
That
living there
doesn't make them a
legally, my
foreigner.
guy.
That doesn't make them a settler. So I have a particular problem with that. Big war on the. Though
All right.
there were many foreign heritage
All right,
cities,
all right,
they are
nigga.
Middle East majority
All
of
right,
the all corporations that we've been. That's next. Siemens who's got a but it itself don't work for Israelis and those who are out the
and European powers of the 20th century for effing up so much. And I think it's one of those factors, I say that facetiously, but in all seriousness, oftentimes what's lost is the role of foreign powers in helping create this terrible situation for all the people and the entire region, right? And the British are extremely responsible, especially in the post-World War I climate. And then once they effed up, they washed their hands of it, gave it to the United Nations, who then made the disastrous decision, especially for Palestinians, right, to carve up the land, 55% to Jews who always lived there, but there were the minority when it comes to both land ownership and numbers, 40% to Palestinians and 5% was for Jerusalem, right? That was supposed to be shared. But instead what happened was about 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled from land. So the realization of the dream of Zionism, right? For those who are watching, the creation of the modern state of Israel in 1948 was the realization of this dream. Oh, we're finally back we have Jerusalem. We've come back. And I don't, like, it's the first time I'm meeting him. I think he's very sincere. I don't think it's performance. I think he's sincere that he wants both people to live side by side. But both people cannot live side by side when one group is crushing the other group, when one group is occupying the other group. You just can't have it. You need some form of equality. And to have that some form of equality, whether it's two states or one state, and let me end on this. Suppose there's one state, right? And realistically now, Jake, this was me 8 years ago, I think 9 years ago. The two-state solution, increasingly, it's like a pipe dream, right? These settlements or communities, which is a word that Jews like to use, they don't like to use the word settler in West Bank. It's almost like if you're watching at home and you don't know, imagine a piece of cheese, right? And if you see Swiss cheese, you know how there's holes in the cheese? The settlements are like holes that keep expanding. And so what's left of the cheese, Jake? Like this thin, kind of pathetic, barely held together, like moth-eaten cheese. Whatever is left, that is the land for the Palestinians, like 22 to 25% left of their historic land. That's it. And many Palestinians are like, all right, this pathetic moth-ridden cheese, this 22% of the land, give that to me. But just give me freedom. And if you talk to Palestinians, that's all they say. We just want freedom. We want the...
And according to Israel, you can't have freedom. So, like, Israel say wants to live side by side, but they don't make any genuine effort. Like maybe don't kill so many Palestinian civilians so they won't have people that hate you. Oh.
I don't think that, a Palestinian and Israeli would meet each other on the street or in a bar.
It's so important to me to constantly be listening and connecting with people who have a different stake in this game from the other side.
Sitting in the presence of everyone, you kind of get to feel more of what they're feeling.
And I think that it's what we all need right now to humanize the so frequently dehumanized.
Obviously, there's two sides to this discussion, and the only way out is through.
Man, I just don't know.
Hi, I'm Steve Clemens, and I have a question. President Donald Trump is put to be one of those. And so let me just ask you, what do you think Donald Trump's strategic map looks like or should look like?
Bro, I just hate people being intellectual cowards, man. Cowards.